Hey, welcome back to the channel. Have you ever looked back at your life and wondered how all the little moments, the choices that seemed insignificant at the time, ended up shaping everything? Well, today, I want to share 3 stories from my life. Nothing fancy, just 3 stories that made all the difference. The first one is about connecting the dots. I dropped out of college at just 6 months in. But I didn't leave immediately. I stuck around for another year and a half, just drifting, trying to figure things out. But why did I drop out in the first place? Well, the story starts before I was even born. My biological mother was a young, unmarried graduate student who decided to give me up for adoption. She had one condition, though. She wanted me to be raised by college-educated parents. Everything was set. A lawyer and his wife were supposed to adopt me. But at the last moment, they decided they wanted a girl instead. That's when my parents, who had been waiting for a child, got a call in the middle of the night. "We've got an unexpected baby boy. Do you want him?" They didn't hesitate. They said yes. Later, when my biological mother found out my adoptive mom had never graduated from college, and my dad hadn't even finished high school, she refused to sign the final adoption papers. She only agreed when my parents promised, really promised, that one day I would go to college. And so 17 years later, I did. But the reality of it hit me fast. The college I chose was nearly as expensive as Stanford, and all of my working-class parents' savings were being drained just to keep me there. 6 months in, I felt lost. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I couldn't see how college was going to help me figure it out. And yet, I was spending every dime my parents had worked so hard to save. I couldn't justify it. So I made one of the scariest decisions of my life. I dropped out. I had no idea if things would turn out okay, but I trusted that somehow they would. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. I didn't have a dorm room, so I crashed on the floors of friends' places. I collected empty Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits just to buy food. And every Sunday night, I'd walk 7 miles across town for a free meal at the Hare Krishna temple. Because honestly, that was the one good meal I'd get all week. But despite the struggle, I loved it. I was free to follow my curiosity, to take the classes that truly interested me, rather than the ones I was supposed to take. And here's where it gets interesting. Reed College happened to have one of the best calligraphy programs in the country. Every poster, every sign on campus was beautifully hand-lettered. Since I wasn't tied to a set curriculum anymore, I took a calligraphy class just because it fascinated me. I learned about different typefaces, about the space between letters, about what makes great design truly great. It was elegant, artistic, and completely impractical. Or so I thought. Fast forward 10 years. I was working on the design of the first Macintosh computer, and suddenly, everything I had learned in that calligraphy class came flooding back. The Mac became the first computer with beautiful typography, with multiple fonts and proportionally spaced letters. If I had never taken that one random class, personal computers might never have had the kind of typography we take for granted today. And since Windows just copied the Mac, well, you get the idea. The crazy thing is, when I was sitting in that calligraphy class, I had no way of knowing how it would ever be useful in my life. But looking back, I can see how the dots connected. You can't always see it in the moment. You just have to trust that somewhere down the line, the dots will all come together. If I had never dropped out, I never would have stumbled into that calligraphy class, and who knows, maybe personal computers wouldn't have the beautiful typography they have today. At the time, it was impossible to see how everything would connect, but looking back, it all made perfect sense. That's the thing about life. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only see the pattern when you reflect on where you've been. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow line up in the future. You have to believe in something, whether it's your gut, destiny, karma, or just life itself. That belief is what gives you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you away from the safe and predictable. And in the end, that makes all the difference. The next story is about love and loss. I was fortunate to discover my passion early in life. Starting Apple in my parents' garage at 20 was a dream come true. We worked relentlessly, and in just 10 years, that small garage startup had grown into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees. We had just launched what we considered our greatest creation, the Macintosh, and I had just turned 30. Then out of nowhere, I was fired. Imagine that, being pushed out of the very company you started. How does that even happen? As Apple expanded, we brought in someone I believe was the right person to help lead the company alongside me. At first it worked, but as time went on, our visions began to drift apart. And when it came down to it, the board of directors took his side. Just like that, at 30 years old, I was out, publicly. Everything I had poured my life into was gone in an instant. It was crushing. For months, I didn't know what to do. I felt like I had failed in entire generations of entrepreneurs. I had dropped the baton just as it was being passed to me. I even met with some of the most respected leaders in the industry, trying to make sense of it all, trying to apologize for failing so spectacularly. The weight of public failure was unbearable. For a moment, I even thought about leaving it all behind, running away from Silicon Valley. But as the dust settled, something became clear. I still loved what I did. That passion hadn't gone anywhere, and the events at Apple didn't change that. I had been rejected, but I was still deeply in love with what I had set out to do, so I made a decision. I would start over. At the time, I couldn't see it, but getting fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to me. The pressure of success had been replaced with the freedom of being a beginner again. I was free to explore, to take risks, to reinvent. There was a time in my life that was both incredibly challenging and profoundly transformative. Over the course of 5 years, I embarked on a journey that led me to create a company called Next, another company called Pixar. And in the midst of it all, I met an extraordinary woman who would later become my wife. Pixar went on to revolutionize animation with the first ever computer-animated feature film, Toy Story, and became the most successful animation studio in the world. In a surprising turn of fate, Apple acquired Next, bringing me back to the company I had once been forced to leave. The technology we built at Next became the foundations of Apple's resurgence, and my personal life flourished as well, with a beautiful family by my side. None of this would have happened if I hadn't been fired from Apple. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but in hindsight, it was exactly what I needed. Life has a way of throwing challenges at you, sometimes knocking you down so hard that it feels impossible to get back up. But in those moments, holding on to what you truly love is what makes the difference. Passion is the fuel that keeps you going, even when everything else seems lost. Whether in work or love, finding that one thing that ignites your soul is crucial. If you haven't discovered it yet, don't stop searching. Never settle for anything less than something that makes you excited to wake up every morning. When you do find it, you'll know. And like any meaningful relationship, it will grow and deepen with time. The pursuit of passion is a lifelong journey, and those who continue seeking it, refusing to settle, find themselves leading the most fulfilling lives. There's another lesson life taught me, and it came from a quote I read when I was 17. Live each day as if it were your last, because one day you will be right. That thought left an imprint on me, and for over 3 decades, I started every morning by looking in the mirror and asking myself one simple question. If today were my last day, would I want to do what I'm about to do? Whenever the answer was no, for too many days in a row, I knew it was time for a change. Remembering that death is inevitable is the most powerful tool I've ever encountered for making life's biggest decisions. Fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, expectations placed by others, none of it matters in the face of mortality. When you truly grasp that you have nothing to lose, you become free to follow your heart. No one wants to die, not even those who believe in a better place beyond this life. And yet, death is life's greatest invention. It clears the old to make room for the new. Right now, that newness is you. But one day, not too far from now, you too will be replaced. It sounds dramatic, but it's the truth. And because time is so limited, wasting it trying to live someone else's life is the greatest mistake you could make. Don't get caught up in the expectations of others. Don't let the noise of outside opinions drown out your inner voice. Most importantly, have the courage to trust your heart and intuition. Deep down, you already know what you are meant to become. Everything else is secondary. Stay hungry, stay foolish. Hey,